Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining. Really appreciate it. Okay, of course, we're going to tonight's class um, is available for sponsorship. When we get sponsors, really helps us continue these classes. Really appreciate it. Um, let's jump right in. This class tonight, we're going to be discussing the story of Purim. We're going to be discussing some interesting commentaries in the story of Purim and what that means for us. Because, of course, Purim, for those who do not know yet, Purim is, God willing, this Tuesday. And, of course, at Chabad, we're going to be hosting a Purim celebration. And if you would like to join, you can RSVP. We really appreciate that. And if you need any information about Purim, please feel free to send us a message. Okay, let's jump right in. So the story of Purim has an interesting. We all know the story. I'm not going to go through the whole story, but let's go through the end of the Megillah. The story of the Purim kind of ends chapter 8 or 9, really. Purim Megillah is 10 chapters. The last chapter is more about, not specifically the last chapter, but even kind of the story winds down pretty much. A lot of cleanup, if you will, in the last couple chapters. But the last chapter discusses, and chapters 8, I shouldn't say chapters, the end of chapter 9 and obviously chapter 10 discusses how to celebrate Purim, what happened, what's the future of Purim. So let's read chapter 9, verse 20 through 28. I don't know if I'll read all of it, but some of it. Mordechai inscribed these events and sent letters to all the Jews in the provinces of King Achashverosh, both near and far, to enjoin them to make the 14th day of the month of Adar and the 15th day thereof every year as days when the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month that was reversed from them, from grief to joy, and from mourning to a festive day, to make them days of feasting and joy, and sending portions one to another and gifts to the poor. So here Mordechai lays out what is the mitzvahs of Purim: to give gifts, to give charity, and to have a feast, etc. And on both the 14th day of Adar and the 15th day of Adar. So the 15th day of Adar is celebrated in walled cities, and the 14th day of Adar is celebrated everywhere else. So here in Duluth, it's not a walled city from the times of Joshua, so we're going to celebrate on the 14th day of Adar. In Jerusalem, for example, we're going to celebrate on the 15th day of Adar. Okay. So he continues, these days shall be remembered and celebrated. Before I get there. The Jews ordained and took upon themselves, and upon their descendants, and upon all those who join them, that is not to be revoked, to establish these 2 days according to their script and according to their appointed time every year. These days shall be remembered and celebrated throughout every generation, in every family, every province, and every city. These days of Purim shall not pass from among the Jewish people, and their remembrance shall not cease from their descendants. So here we have a very bold claim the Megillah makes, that the Purim will never stop being remembered and celebrated by the Jewish people. Very bold statement. No other holiday does it ever say well, there's not really many but holidays that are outside the Torah. Obviously, the ones that are in the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses, those books, those holidays are God commanded. So obviously, they're not going anywhere. But it's a strange thing to say that this holiday is different. So let's see what is special about Purim, what is different about Purim that has this idea that the Torah that this holiday be forever. So again, if the holiday is established by the rabbis, it has to be forever. If the holiday is established by God, it has to be forever. So what is unique? Why is the Megillah telling us something special in this radical claim that Purim will never not be celebrated? And if anything, it's the one holiday that seemingly might not have had the same force as other holidays. Why? Let's go to the Talmud in Tractate Megillah, which obviously is about Purim, and page 7a. He says as follows. Esther told the sages, establish me for generations, meaning establish Purim as a holiday and the reading of the Megillah for generations to come. And the rabbis replied to Esther,
we will arouse the ire of the nations, as the Megillah tells of the Jewish defeat of their enemies, and it would be best left not to be publicized. So this is the oldest debate in the book, over 2,500 years. Should we or should we not discuss, celebrate the downfall of the nations? Are we going to create? Are we going to create anti-Semitism by talking about the holiday of Purim? So Esther says, "You're too late." Why? She responded, "It is already written in the Royal Chronicles." In other words, this story has been publicized by the non-Jews. So if the non-Jews publicize the story, then there's nothing wrong with the Jewish people celebrating it. Everybody already knows the story. So the cat's out of the bag. Maybe you had an argument that you could create anti-Semitism by running around saying, the non-Jews tried to kill the Jews and we defeated them, right? But Esther says the cat's out of the bag. The non-Jews know about it. This is this was a very highly publicized political story that had tremendous consequences for the Persian kingdom. So Esther says it's all good. So now, if that's the case, we see that this holiday doesn't have such strength. That the rabbis were like, maybe this is not such a great idea. So why does the Megillah have this say that this holiday will never stop? And in fact, in the Ibn Ezra, a medieval commentator on the Megillah, on Tanakh and the Megillah, he says as follows. She writes that she wrote in verse 29, in chapter 9, verse 29, it says as follows: Queen Esther, daughter of Abichai, and Mordechai the Jew, wrote down all the acts of power to confirm the second Purim letter. So why does it have the second Purim letter? So the Ibn Ezra comments, the Jews observed Purim for several years and then neglected it. Mordechai therefore asked the queen, who had more authority, to write it to the Jews to observe it annually. The Megillah testifies to this. Esther's order confirmed these matters of Purim, for without that order, it would have been forgotten. So actually, Esther had to kind of reinforce Purim, that it wasn't even being celebrated. Jews were like, why are we celebrating Purim? And let's actually read the Medrash that even goes further. The Medrash in Mishlei, chapter 9, says as follows. Rabbi Abahu said, what did Esther do when the Jewish people were in distress? She called a party for Achashverosh and Haman and got them drunk with wine. Haman thought she was honoring him, but didn't realize she was laying a trap, acquiring her nation forever. She set the table in this world and in the Messianic age. This refers to the good name she acquired for herself in both worlds, for all holidays will eventually be abolished, except for Purim, as the verse states, these days of Purim shall not pass from among the Jewish people, and their remembrance shall not cease from their descendants. So here we actually see that that the Medrash says that all other holidays are going to be abolished, and Purim is going to be forever. So that's even more radical. Again, in the Megillah it says Purim will never stop. But the Medrash explains that it's actually going to go further, that all other holidays will be abolished and Purim is forever. Now, you could say, it's very nice, Rabbi, but that's a Medrash. We know that not every Medrash is to be taken literally. Not every Medrash has going to be, is followed. So maybe this is, just what they call, in Hebrew, it's called a Medrash Pliya. It's a pretty shocking Medrash. There's something like that. That sometimes a Medrash will say something that's pretty radical. Okay, we don't know how to explain it. We do know how to explain it. We could explain it in a spiritual way. We could find some other text to explain it. But we have a big problem. The big problem is that Maimonides, in his Code of Jewish Law, quotes this as law. So let's look in the Laws of Megillah and Chanukah, chapter 2, Halacha 18. Maimonides says as follows. All the books of the prophets and writings will be abolished in the Messianic era except for Esther. Although all memories of the difficulties endured by the people will be forgotten, as the verse says, for the original suffering has been forgotten and hidden from my eyes, Purim will not be abolished. As the verse says, these days of Purim shall not pass from among their people, and their remembrance shall not cease from their descendants. So Maimonides quotes the Megillah, seemingly based on this Medrash, and says all the other books will be abolished, and the only thing that we're going to be celebrating when Mashiach comes is going to be Purim. And that and he bases it on the verse that says that all suffering will be forgotten.
Okay, so he says based on that, if all suffering be forgotten, then only holiday that we're gonna keep talking about is Purim because Purim explicitly says that it endures. And again, so first of all, how can you say all these books will be forgotten? How can you say that the Medrash says that all festivals are going to be forgotten or nullified? If you're going to say they're nullified, what do you mean? These are commandments from God. The Book of Esther, as even though it's part of the canon, it's a holiday established by the rabbis. How can you say a holiday established by the rabbis, by Mordechai and Esther, is going to supersede Passover, Shavuos, Sukkot? It's not possible. Okay. So and in fact, the Rashba, Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet. I'm sorry, Shlomo ben Aderet. We did a video in the past about the Rashba, a famous, very important Sephardic rabbi. And his responsa says as follows: "You asked me how the idea that all the holidays be as abolished, except for Purim, aligns with the statement that not even the tip of the smallest letter will ever be abolished from the Torah." He says, "I have heard many explanations offered for this teaching, but none have satisfied me. Please explain it to me." So the Rashba, the great Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet, could not explain this medrash. Okay, so how are we going to explain it? So Hasidic thought explains this idea, and the Rebbe discussed this, that if we look at the words of the Medrash actually doesn't say that the holidays will be abolished. The word is they will be nullified. Okay? What does it mean to be nullified? The Messianic era is going to have everything. Messianic era will have tons of all unlimited joy. The Messianic era will have the temple, will have the service in the temple, everything that Jewish people need will be there. And there's expression in the Talmud, Shraga b'tira mayahana. What does it help? A candle in the sun. That when you have a tremendous amount of light, lighting a candle is superfluous. And the same thing is going to be by all the holidays. All the holidays are going to be that the holidays are established for joy. The holidays of the Jewish people are for joy, but you're having joy all the time. So what is going to be the big deal about the holidays? Of course, we're going to celebrate the holidays. It's a mitzvah in the Torah, but they're all going to be in a way they'll be nullified. They won't have the same impact that the holidays have in our current era. And so now, but Purim is different. For some reason, Purim is going to still be unique, distinct. And the question is, why? So let's go back to the Megillah. Megillah is the source of all this whole question. How is it possible that Purim will be forever? If we look, what does the Megillah say? It says, "V'zichron lo-yosef mizaram." Its remembrance will not cease from their descendants. So there must be that there's a connection between the descendants and the fact that it will not cease, which seemingly, on a very simple level, means the children. That the reason for the children is that the children is what made this holiday forever. Let's look in the Medrash, in Esther Rabbah, the Medrash Rabbah on Megillah Esther, chapter 7, says as follows. At that moment, when the letters of the decree were sealed and placed in Haman's hands, he went to rejoice together with all his associates. Haman is thrilled. The Jewish people are going to be wiped out. They encountered Mordechai walking ahead of them. Mordechai saw 3 children coming from school, and he ran after them. When Haman and his associates saw Mordechai running after the children, they followed him to find out what he would ask them. When Mordechai reached the children, the Medrash tells us, he said to one of them, "Tell me your pasuk," which is an expression in the Talmud, "Psuk li psukecha." It means, tell me the verse that you studied in school today. Right? A lot of parents ask this to the children, "What did you learn in school today?" "Mom, nothing. Dad, nothing." Apparently this was a common thing, and the Talmud records many stories of rabbis asking children and seeing actually prophecy in this, as we'll see in a second. So when you ask your children, they say nothing, they missed an opportunity to be your prophet. Okay. He says, "Tell me your Tell me the verse you studied in school. So the first one says, Al tira mipacha pisaim u'misheres rishayim kisavei. It's a verse in Proverbs. It says, do not fear sudden terror or the destruction of the wicked when it comes. Pretty apropos. Don't worry about sudden terror. Second child said, I learned a different verse from Isaiah. Utzu eitza v'sufar davar davar v'leyakum ki imonu kel. Devise a plan, it will be foiled. Speak a word, and it will not stand, for God is with us. Again, very, very apropos for the situation that the Jewish people were in. The third child says, a different verse from Isaiah chapter 46, V'adzikna anihu, v'yatseva ani esbel, ani asisi, v'ani esa, v'ani esbel v'amaleit. Even to old age, I am the same, and even to gray hair, I will carry you. Carry you. I have made, and I will bear, I will carry, and I will deliver. And again, very apropos that God will deliver the Jewish people. And in fact, many people have the custom to say these verses, these three verses, at the end of every single prayer, every single day. So if you come to Chabad and you join us for a service, you will hear us singing these three verses at the end of every prayer. After the Aleinu prayer, we conclude with these three verses. So Mordechai heard this, the Medrash tells us. He laughed and rejoiced. Haman said to him, what is the joy you feel because of these children's words? He answered, because they have brought me good news, and I need not fear the evil plan you devised against us. So Haman says, I have a great idea. My first people I'm going to attack are going to be the children. So the Medrash continues that after the gallows were built for Mordechai, Haman goes looking for Mordechai, and he finds him teaching 22,000 children. And he placed them in iron chains, the Medrash tells us, and stationed guards outside, telling them tomorrow he'd return and kill all the children first, and then hang Mordechai. Their mothers brought them bread and water and said, children, eat and hungry, so you won't die hungry. They placed their hands on their holy books and swore by the life of Mordechai, their teacher. They would not eat or drink, but would die fasting. They all cried in unison until their pleas reached the heavens, and the God heard the sound of their cries. At that moment, God's mercy flowed over, and he rose from his throne of judgment and sat on the throne of mercy, saying, what is the noise I hear like goats and kids? Moses rose before God and said, Master of the world, these are not goats or kids, but the youngsters of your nation who have been fasting for 3 days and nights, and tomorrow the enemy wishes to slaughter them like goats and kids. At that moment, God took the decree and sealed with cement and tore them up, and made Achashverosh have a tumultuous night, as the verse says, on that night. Right? And that's when Achashverosh can't sleep. He's told that Mordechai saved his life, and we all know what happens from there. So the Jewish people depends on the children, and in the story of Purim, we saw this evident. And and this is again, so this is why we see that because of this. So in other words, the verse that says at the end of the Megillah, it says that the words will endure, and through their descendants, is saying it will endure because of the descendants, because of the children, because of the self-sacrifice of these young children that they study Torah at the risk of their life. That is the victory of Purim. And that is why Purim will endure, through the children. Just the same way we saw the Torah endure, because of that the children were the ones who kept the Torah to endure. The story of Purim will endure because of the children. So that's why on Purim we have a special emphasis on the children, and the children bang Haman, and they disturb in shul, and they do all the things, and they dress up, and they're rowdy, but it's all about them. The children are the ones who brought the victory, and the children are the ones who are going to bring to the ultimate victory of the coming of Mashiach, maybe speedily now. Have a good Shabbos, and God willing, have a happy Purim, and we will see you, God willing, next week.